You mentioned earlier on the Sovietization of the banking system. Is this actually the same game of power by the ECB to become, I don't know, the only player in town?
Yes, well, that's how I formulated in another interview. The game to become the only player in town. If we have no change in policy, then that's what you're heading for. So is this really what everyone wants? We need to be aware of this. And I think if the ECB really reflects on this, and at the moment there's actually an internal reflection program going on. The new president, Madame Lagarde, said, we want to reflect on monetary policy. And I think they should reflect on this. Do they really want to become the only bank left in the Eurozone? And if that's not their intention, well, then please change your policies now, very quickly, and do not continue the negative rate policy. That's just killing banks. Even more banks will disappear. Abandon that, have positive short-term rates, and give a signal to the bond market that you're slowing bond purchases and you're going to stop bond purchases. And suddenly you'll see bond rates going up. You have a positive yield curve, then banks know, yes, it is again profitable to lend. They don't need those reserves. Forget about that. They will create credit.
Yeah.
And the central bank should also say, oh, by the way, we've learned our lesson. Now all the banks, please create credit for business lending, for business investment, especially SMEs. We're going to lower the Basel risk weight, or the risk weight. They don't need Basel. The ECB can just decide this. We're going to lower the risk weight, no matter what Basel says. ECB decides that actually, if you think about it, if you do a proper analysis, the lowest risk lending, apart from lending to the sovereign, is lending to SMEs. Tell me, how many banking crises have there been due to too much bank lending to productive SMEs for business investment?
None.
None, exactly.
Yeah.
So they should say, okay, we'll also change the rules, and you won't have to have so much capital for SME lending. We'll increase capital requirements for property lending and things like that.
So the decentralization goes of the banking system goes with it, right? The creation of
Yes.
not-for-profit local banks.
Oh, yes. Now that you mention it, we should set up not-for-profit community banks. By the way, not-for-profit doesn't mean they're not profitable. They're actually highly profitable. Banking is profitable, but they're stakeholder banks. So all these profits, they belong to the community. They go back one way or another to the community through professional banking, conservative professional banking. And you see, I think one way the regulators will realize this is actually quite a good idea is when they realize that when you have a decentralized banking system with many small banks, and small banks we know are much better capitalized than big banks, percentage wise, they have always been. This system is more resilient, it's more stable. And when there's a shock, there's a crisis, that's the system that does best. Look at Germany, it did best, in the 2008, 2009 crisis, it really fared well. And again, 2020, I expect Germany will do better than other countries because of this system. Even when you want to put in government money, well, once you have the system of decentralized local banks, that's an efficient way of putting the money into the system. Also, loan guarantees. In the UK, there aren't enough local banks, and therefore there's a big problem to get the money to where it's needed. Small firms, SMEs, entrepreneurs. This can be done. And then regulators will see their job is getting easier because there won't be the scandals. There won't be if you have ethical local stakeholder banks, far fewer scandals, far fewer negative stories in the papers. And the regulators look much better. And also you won't have banking crises and you won't have big shocks to the system. So really, it does make everyone's life easier.
Are the banks which are part of the ECB able to give their own window guidance to their commercial banks?
That's an interesting question. I believe the answer is, well, in a legal sense, technical sense, yes. But then there's politics. So whether in reality, in a political sense, they will be allowed to by the center, we don't know. Maybe it's slightly doubtful. But again, if there's public support for it,
Mm-hmm.
The public, I think, has a lot of influence. If the public speaks more about this and demands, why don't we have credit guidance, window guidance by the central banks to
Mm-hmm.
discourage the asset purchase lending and encourage lending to SMEs, and we also change the Basel rules concerning their capital adequacy, the regulators ultimately will listen. I think that's what's needed. Maybe the problem is simply that, like with scientists, when they're too focused on their research and they don't talk to people in society, they actually end up going on the wrong path of science. It's still science, but it's not sort of disconnected from reality. And I think we've given too much independence to central bankers. They may be well-meaning, but they're too much focused on their areas without thinking, how does this link back to society? And when they realize, oh, actually society is now demanding this, oh, we've neglected to engage with society on this and all the feedback concerning wrong policies, we need to change that. I think one can have a much healthier and better relationship and better regulation of banks and better economic performance, more job creation. I mean, small banks lend to small companies. They're the ones that create jobs. So for any politician, it should be a no-brainer. They should support the creation of new local banks. And they don't cost much. They're quite cheap to set up. And the IT and the technical requirements, they're all there, can be done quite cheaply.